Video 3. An outsider's entry. 1. Background. Castaneda himself provides slightly varying accounts of how he met the sorcerer he referred to as Juan Matus. How much of this is a willful obfuscation of the facts for purposes of personal protection, how much was honest failing of memory, and how much is attributable to other reasons can't ever be known. I take the following approach. A. The basic choice is to dismiss Castaneda's writings as fiction, or to have an underlying belief in the truth of them. Clearly, the first option leads nowhere, in terms of an undertaking like the present work. So, accepting the underlying truthfulness, one has to accept the following premises.
A1. We can never know exactly what was kept in and what was left out. A2. We must accept that what has been left in is representative of the whole, to a degree that allows for meaningful examination. A3. Even if A2 isn't true, I have no way of knowing how untrue it is, or how incomplete the existing record is. In a very real sense, what I don't know not only can't hurt me, I can't begin to assess the impact anyway.
B. Castaneda's original approach was a scientific one. He came to Mexico as a PhD candidate in anthropology at UCLA, intent on studying the uses of medicinal plants among the Yaqui Indians as his dissertation topic. This much is more or less not open to debate, as the facts of it can be corroborated and they took place prior to any association between Castaneda and any sorcerers. B1. Castaneda's offhand comments about how he was approaching, or attempting to approach certain things, lend credence to his following at that time the scientific and analytical methods generally accepted in the social sciences at that time. B2. Given his initial scientific approach, and his obsessive note-taking, Castaneda more or less wrote down everything he saw, heard, or experienced. I'm confident that at the very least there is a basis for the logical examination of Castaneda's work. C. Regarding dates, Castaneda often dated entries. I don't think it matters much, and I think Castaneda realized this as time went on, largely dispensing with the practice of providing dates. There are multiple good reasons for this, none of which are particularly relevant to this section of the narrative. I mention the subject of dates at all only because at times I do refer to dates. These references are not to imply that I have any special insight into when a certain thing happened, I'm simply parroting Castaneda's references. D. Sources. My sources for the contents of these videos are solely Castaneda's officially published works. I have no access, nor claim to have any access to, any raw notes, rough drafts, unpublished additions to the books, etc. I have not read any literature from any foundation, corporation, or person who claims to be or to have been associated with Castaneda. Moreover, I have studiously avoided reading any analysis or criticism of Castaneda's works. This is not because I believe Castaneda's writings to be above all criticism or questioning, but simply because from what I can tell everything written about Castaneda and his works falls into one of four categories: abject hero worship, academic jealousy, or I was there and that's not at all how it happened type travelogues, and hit pieces by people eager to expose Castaneda as a fraud. So, for better or worse, I feel better off having not read any of that. 2. Stranger in a Strange Land. Sometime in late 1959 or early 1960, Carlos Castaneda, UCLA PhD candidate in anthropology, was referred to a Yaqui Indian by the name of Juan Matus. This man, Castaneda was told, would be able to supply much valuable information on the subject of Castaneda's doctoral dissertation, the uses of medicinal plants among the Yaqui Indians.
Castaneda went into his first encounter with Don Juan in a fashion typical of how any anthropologist conducting field work would. Note: Castaneda uses the Spanish honorific to refer to Juan Matus throughout his works, thus he is commonly referred to as Don Juan in this narrative. Castaneda was hoping to take notes, photos, and record audio of their encounter. In addition, he knew that it was often necessary to loosen the tongues of potential informants with cash payments and even moderate amounts of alcohol when necessary. All these and more Castaneda was willing to try in order to secure the services of a good informant, and if the assessment of Castaneda's friend was even partially accurate, Don Juan represented a potentially great informant.
The first encounter took place in a bus station in a border town in Arizona. Castaneda had no reason to feel upset or scared, or no reason not to think that his efforts would be ultimately spectacular, both overall and in this specific encounter with Don Juan. As mentioned above, if the informant was not happy to talk of his or her own accord, providing payment often worked well. The scientist was able to exert a measure of control over the encounters, and the informant, in the context of being employed, usually spoke at length about whatever the interviewer wanted to ask about. This encounter did not go at all as planned. Don Juan, although clearly of advanced age, was extremely smart, quick, and most definitely not an alcoholic, as Castaneda's friend more or less thought he was. Don Juan quickly derailed the interview, catching Castaneda way off guard to the extent that Castaneda was having serious doubts about the entire association and had consigned Don Juan to the social science dustbin labeled difficult informant. A digression. In the traditional practice of anthropological field work, the idea was to find knowledgeable informants, extract useful information from them, and, by repeating the process multiple times in the same population, reach a consensus of answers that could be relied upon to be largely accurate. By asking the same questions of many different people in different ways at different times, one could be confident that the effect of any one informant being misinformed, sick, delirious, mischievous, or in any other way an outlier, had been more than compensated for. Thus, a good informant was one who was agreeable, pleasant, eager to talk, and clearly not in any way a societal outcast. The difficult informant, by contrast, was challenging, sullen, deliberately misleading, non-compliant, etc. Difficult informants were of more or less no value, since tone could only use their answers as difficult to extract information from, and harder still to verify any of their answers. To someone in Castaneda's position, losing a promising informant whose participation might make or break his doctoral work would have come as a painfully devastating blow. Digression 2. A school of thought developed in the early 1970s wherein the role of anthropologists was re-examined in light of the demise of colonialism worldwide. While the popular view at the time was that anthropology helped make colonialism and cultural genocide work, in reality largely the opposite was true. There were many groups that anthropologists would never have been able to safely approach in their pre-white contact state. Anthropology and its practitioners certainly benefited from colonialism and cultural genocide, in that their work was made safer, and in some cases, possible in the first place, but overall more was lost than was gained. The societies that anthropologists encountered were often highly altered as a result of prior contact with whites, almost all of which was negative: slavers, armies, missionaries, etc. Individual anthropologists were, in overwhelming majority, much more concerned with the accurate recording of information and constructing workable theories based on that information, than with any political ends.
Castaneda tried all of the normal inducements, money chief among them. He tried being somewhat haughty, he tried acting more knowledgeable than he really was, he tried pleading. Although Castaneda published everything in English, he and Don Juan were both fluent in English and Spanish, and their interactions regularly took place in both languages, often with significant switching mid-conversation. However, Don Juan made it clear that he wanted to meet again, at Don Juan's house in northeast Mexico this time, and sooner rather than later. From Castaneda's perspective, the encounter had been a total disaster. Don Juan didn't seem to like him at all, and in his heart of hearts Castaneda had to admit that he hadn't cared much for the old man himself. Castaneda couldn't have known that Don Juan had seen something very special about him in that first encounter, and needed to be sure that the silly man from Los Angeles, who had had the effrontery to talk about things he had no idea about, plants, would come back. The thing that was special inside the silly man was more important than any other consideration. This is the first glimpse we're given of the true nature of a sorcerer. Far from some popular conception that a sorcerer is obsessed with invisible forces and seeks out chaos, Don Juan demonstrates that his actions, in both realms, are continually and impeccably precise. During their encounter, Don Juan gave Castaneda a very distinctive look, a look that Castaneda later described as one that could be almost felt physically in his midsection. Don Juan knew that Castaneda would not be able to explain the power of the look in any rational way, and Castaneda's own natural scientific curiosity would compel his return. Mission accomplished, with simple precision. A fine example of the sorcerer's logic, that supports every action Don Juan takes.